I'm not out here preaching like there's an easy way to get there. I'm preaching that we have to get rid of pick me culture in the creative industries because that is what makes us the most vulnerable.
Hello and welcome to Off the Lot. The film industry is changing fast, and if you want to make movies, it's time to become your own gatekeeper. If you've got a vision and the drive to make it happen, this podcast is for you.
We're your hosts, Ken Kavatoff and Anthony Epp, and every week we dive into the hustle, challenges, and real-world strategies of independent filmmaking. We talk to directors, producers, and industry pros about what it really takes to get your film made.
So if you're serious about making movies, hit follow or subscribe. It helps us keep this going. And if you like what you hear, spread the word, share the episode, leave a comment, and help more indie filmmakers find Off the Lot. Let's dive in. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. Over the last 13 years, Seed and Spark has been so influential in the indie filmmaking community, helping nearly 6,000 creators raise a combined total of over $72 million for indie film projects. Both Anthony and I and many of our friends have used Seed and Spark to raise funds for our films, and it truly is an amazing platform. So we're very excited to talk to you today about all things indie film, crowdfunding, distribution, and where all of this is headed as Hollywood and the landscape around us just continues to shift under our feet.
And what's really great about Seed and Spark versus other crowdfunding platforms is that we have found is that you really emphasize that this is much more than just raising funds for a movie. It's about building an audience and building an ecosystem around your film and thinking about the end goal way in advance. So what inspired you to form Seed and Spark, and where you see a platform like Seed and Spark fitting into today's landscape, especially not just with crowdfunding, but with distribution?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And I'm delighted that the platform has been useful to you. Thank you so much. Yeah, Seed and Spark started to solve my own problems as a filmmaker. The first time I made a feature film was with a bunch of women for whom it would be our first time in the roles. Me as a first time producer, we had first time writers and directors. Not at all first time actors, but we sort of got pat on the head and sent on our way in every room that we were in of like, that's cute, move along. And we also knew at our core that as women, especially women, like we were all in our late 20s, early 30s, we were a really underserved audience for anything that looked like a real human character. Plenty of girlfriends, plenty of women whose entire, plot points are to serve the men or to compete for the men, but nothing that really talked about the friendships that we were experiencing. That was the movie we wanted to make. And all of the gatekeepers were like, yeah, nobody wants to see that unless you could put some lesbian erotica in it. And we were like, what? But they didn't even mean for lesbians, by the way, right? They were like,
Right.
if you could tell a woman's friendship story, but so that men would watch it. And I'm shocked to say that 13 years later, we're basically still in that frame of like men can't enjoy female characters. And rather than being like, that's a cultural problem, they're like, we just have to keep making movies that understand that, right? So we just got told no in a bunch of ugly ways. And we were like, forget you guys. I did. We were going to make it on our own. And we made an appeal to our audience on our own little website. This was 2010, 11. It was a WordPress website. And we built a wedding registry so that everybody could see exactly what it would take to make this film, right? Bug spray, sunscreen, camera rentals, car rentals, you name it. And then we put it out onto, our limited social media at that time, I guess it was Facebook only, and sent it out to everybody we knew. And a really interesting thing happened, which was when people could see what it would take to make the movie and why we were making the movie, those two things really motivated them to get involved in a way that made sense to them, right? So it was a nurse who sent us the first aid kit. It was my cousin who was working in an outdoor sports warehouse who drop shipped us a case of bug spray and sunscreen. Like people all of a sudden were like, I too am useful to a film. And we needed to raise $20,000 in order to be able to go shoot. And we raised $23,000 in cash and literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans and gifts of locations and goods and services. Like a local used car dealer read the script and told us, John, sweet John, this is the cars I think your main characters would drive. And we were like, we totally agree. And he just gave us the cars for the 6 weeks that we were up and shooting. It was
Wow.
totally incredible, the kind of community that was built around this. We were shooting in a small town in Maine, which also meant we had to do a lot of goodwill building. We were shooting in a town that had been ravaged by the movie Thinner. And like apparently this like really Hollywood crew came in and just like ran roughshod over the town, and everybody was still angry about it like 20 years later. So we also had to do a lot of goodwill building to be able to shoot a movie there, which was not at the scale of Thinner, as you can imagine. But once we completed that, we had people from all over the world who'd participated. We had more than 450 participants in the crowdfunding campaign. And all of a sudden, the sales agents and distributors who had looked the other way were like, wait, how many email addresses do you have? How many theatrical markets does that represent? And I found out like how little audience data got them excited. I was like, oh. And granted, this is, whatever, 13 years ago when like they didn't know from data anyway, right? They've gotten a little bit better about it, but only a little. Yeah. So creators from all over the country started reaching out to me to say, how did you do that? And like, could I do that on Kickstarter? And, are there other ways that we could do it? Or could we do it the way that you did it? And we literally just like, I typed a list into a WordPress website and put a PayPal link at the bottom. And somebody was like, well, that's an MVP. Like, that's what a minimum viable product for a tech platform looks like. And it worked. And so we started developing Seed and Spark. And I remember we were like 4 or 5 months into like the real development process. And I went to a couple film festivals with a little iPad that had like kind of a sketch of this website, talked to creators about what their challenges were. And they were like, yes, raising money is hard. Finding distribution is much harder. Like I remember it was like July and we were aiming to launch in December. And it became clear that like if we were really going to launch something that was useful, like a really useful addition to the universe, we needed to connect the dots between crowdfunding and distribution. And I remember the call that I was on being like, but I don't want to get into distribution. I was like, and if I don't, I'm literally not going to be able to accomplish this vision of like long-term career sustainability for creators. If I do not try to solve this problem, it won't matter. And that was the experience I had also had as a producer of like, I don't just make movies. I have to distribute them. I have to know how to distribute them. And I feel like for the last 13 years, I've been holding creators' hands and getting them comfortable with the fact that like they don't escape any part of the pipeline if they want to have a really rich and sustainable career. You really have to understand the whole business end to end. Like this is a creative job and a business job, and you don't get to leave one behind. And there are too many stories of the creators who are like, I'm just going to go do the creative thing. And then they're like, where'd all the money go? Yeah, we connected the dots and we launched Seed and Spark. Very rudimentary back then. It was like crowdfunding platform and like a TVOD, a transactional VOD platform where you could upload your film, set the price, and stream to your audience. And it barely worked. Honestly, the technology was very bad in the beginning. And because it was bad in the beginning, I had to find other ways to develop the audience. So we developed some workshops, the foundational one called Crowdfunding to Build Independence that we've taught all over the world now for the last 13 years. And it has literally never been more relevant than today. And we continue to teach that workshop all over the world because we're helping creators get comfortable with really caring about fostering a relationship with the audience. And we find that the best time to get them comfortable with that is when they're thinking about funding their next project, right? When the project is full of hope and possibility. The worst time to reach a creator to talk to them about distribution is when they finish the film, it's gone to festivals, and now nothing's happening. And they feel tired and bummed out and like disappointed and heartbroken. That's not a good time to like go lecture a creator about like, well, you should have cared about distribution in the beginning. No, we have to start
Right.
at the beginning of a project when you're like the most excited and the most energetic about it. And that's why I think crowdfunding is such an important moment to be talking about distribution. And I think it's honestly why we've become the number one platform in the world for the film space is because we're connecting the dots for creators and they're actually seeing the downstream benefits of it.
My time using Seed and Spark, I crowdfunded a film last year, a short film, and raised $12,000. And just really diving into it, it was the first time that I had used it directly. And it was just amazing the amount of support that you have and the videos and sort of just the mindset towards it versus something like Indiegogo or Kickstarter or something where I was just like, oh, this is just this incredible holistic view of the entire process. And then also, again, just going onto your website or onto YouTube and seeing the videos of your workshops and how to break this all down and how to really think about it. I taught part-time at the Vancouver Film School, and I taught a producing for writers course, which taught the writing program how to make a short film from scratch. And so, of
Awesome.
course, at the end of the program, I was like, look, we're going to watch a couple videos from Emily Best that will tell you exactly what you need to do when you're going out into the real world and putting money together for your movies. So it's just this incredible resource that I continue to go back to, especially now about to crowdfund a little bit for my feature. Yeah, just thinking about distribution ahead of time and how things are shifting there too.
Oh my gosh, my absolute pleasure. What a delight to know that those videos are worthwhile. I no longer really ever want to see myself on camera ever again. I'm mostly like I minimize the view in Zoom these days. I just like I'm sick of my own face, but I'm so glad that they are useful. And I think that video series is probably going to get an update this year because we did shoot it in 2015 and a few things have changed since then. But yeah, I mean, the truth is like the practices are still sound, like that nothing's ever changed. And I go back to was it 2008? This futurist named Kevin Kelly published an article called A Thousand True Fans. And it was
Right.
really about the music business, but it was about if you can cultivate 1,000 fans that will spend $100 a year, that's a living, right?
Yeah.
That's 2008 economics, but like that's a living. And I think where film sort of like just fell south immediately is when we moved away from physical media where you produce a DVD for $2 and you sell it for $14 to a stream which might, if you are lucky, pay you 0.00004 cents per hour, which I think is Amazon's like like
Right.
streaming pay at this point. And then everybody's like, where'd all the money go? And it's like, well, we used to have a real capacity for super fans to spend money and really support the artist in a way that was profitable. And now even your super fans, you might make like $1, if they like
Yeah.
watch it, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I shudder to think how much money the Great British Baking Show has made off of me in the last couple of years because I watch it again and again for comfort. And the answer is probably not very much. And I'm the superest of all the super fans, right?
Yeah, they've probably made $40 off of you watching it over and
Yeah,
over and over and over again.
exactly. But they made money when I bought the cookbooks, right? I really took that to heart. I mean, that article came out just right around when I was kind of coming online as a professional artist and producer. And I thought, right, okay, my job is to build this kind of relationship. And I think that really influenced the way we built Seed and Spark because if I spent $10,000 on digital ads, I might reach, I don't know, 100,000 people, 200,000 people. And like 0.1% of them might convert to a customer if I'm lucky. If I go and teach a workshop to 100 people, 95 of them are kind of like fans for life. It usually doesn't cost me, maybe it cost me a couple $100 to fly myself wherever I was teaching, but I really think that like if you go into the community and you provide things of value, you build the kind of fans that allow you to, for example, with Seed and Spark, until I met Simon Sorich, our CTO, who was like a 29-year-old self-taught, like it was a miracle that we found him. I found him off of Craigslist, my friends. He's the most brilliant engineer I've ever worked with in my life. But until we found Simon and gave him like a year to rebuild the website from the ground up on his own, I had like 3 years where the technology sucked and I needed people to like us anyway and like suffer with us because they believed in it. And so
Mhm.
I feel like artists can do the same. Like your first 3 to 8 years of work might kind of suck, right? So what are the reasons that people stick with you and stay involved with you as you're learning and getting better? And there's so many examples of that. I mean, Issa Rae made 4 web series before she got a TV show, and she made it with her friends and with her own equipment, and just kept getting better at it until she was ready to run a show. So I think that there's really something to that, building a relationship. And rather than thinking about it as I have to reach millions of people, it's like, can I build towards 1,000 people who really care? And that
Right.
might actually sustain me.
The one difference between filmmakers and musicians is if I have my guitar, I can put out a song tomorrow
Yeah.
and it costs me very little.
Yep.
Like in terms of physical, like actual
Yep.
hard costs. Whereas making a movie, even the least expensive movie, is still, $6,000 to $10,000 of actual cash costs. And if you want to make anything that has any kind of production value or has an actor in it, it's going to be more than that. And so it sounds like from what you're saying is that, that start off keeping your costs as low as possible while you do that sucking
Yes.
and just try to build on that. So is the objective, in your opinion, then to keep doing that, and then there's a lottery ticket at the end and Hollywood comes along and says, here's your $1 million? And I know that I'm asking that very rhetorically. Where do you see that path for that the next filmmaker going?
I think it takes a lot of patience and perseverance no matter what to forge a career as an artist. In the US, like we don't have any public funding, and now forget it. We won't have any public funding for the arts for the next generation probably.
Right.
It's really devastating what's happening. And so we have to use the tools of capitalism, as much as I hate to say that, and that is like providing things that are valuable to our audience so that they will get engaged and stay engaged. And the truth is, most distributors don't have a relationship with audiences. So if you show up with a relationship to an audience, that's very valuable to a distributor. That's very valuable to a studio. It's not about a lottery ticket. It is about building up the value so that you get sort of like your larger and larger reach partners. You don't start there, but you can grow to there. And I would say the people who really focus on doing things that make a small budget luxurious, the Duplass brothers have built an entire career on this. They just made things that were like pretty unimpeachably excellent for very low budgets, and they owned them outright. And then after about a decade, that library had a lot of value that they
Mhm.
could then license, right? But they owned it all, and they really built kind of a practice of trying to make small budget things seem luxurious, and that's the advice that they always give. But there are so many examples of creators who really went and built an audience of their own, and then it wasn't a lottery ticket, it was the studio or the platform coming to them being like, please, can we make your next thing? And that's helpful, and some of them looked at the deal terms and said no thanks.
They realized that they were gonna get ripped off by doing that everybody was
Yeah.
getting ripped off.
Or God, the number of stories where, they say yes, and then the sort of core creative thread gets decimated by endless layers of notes and bureaucracy, right? I'm not out here preaching like there's an easy way to get there. I'm preaching that we have to get rid of pick me culture in the creative industries, because that is what makes us the most vulnerable. 2018, I looked at what Netflix was doing and I was like, this is very bad. They
Mhm.
are destroying the business models that are actually sustainable to creators. They are leveling, and I mean like atomic level leveling the distribution space. We lost a ton of independent distributors. We lost entire windows of value, and they paid for it. They borrowed a bunch of money and they bought everyone off, and everybody was so excited to get picked and get
Right.
handed these big checks, and they sold the business model downstream for that pick me feeling. I'm about to go to a panel in New York City. I shouldn't even say this out loud. It is with a very large AI company and several of the largest studios. And the studios are doing what they did less than 10 years ago when they drove the business model off a cliff the first time. They're getting in bed with big tech. And they're like, yeah, 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 all this vertical integration, it destroyed the labor protections, it destroyed the antitrust protections. You have David Zaslav, the worst person in the world, running most stuff now. It has created an absolutely devastating situation. And now they're like, well, AI will probably solve it. And I'm just like, have you learned nothing in the last decade? And the answer is yes, they've learned to only prioritize shareholder outcomes. That's the lesson that's been learned. And so if we want to have a real sustainable pathway for independent content, and in the United States with the very rapid rise of fascist governance, if we want to be able to tell stories outside of a dominant narrative, we have to like go 10 toes down on independent models that we control. We don't have a choice. Yes, I would love for us to only be thinking about what movies we're going to make and not how we're going to save the distribution space, but like we don't have that
We
luxury.
don't ha Yeah, we're kind of in that in the Les Miserables part of the story, right? Where it's the revolution first, and then we'll worry about whether or not we can have dance parties after, right? I keep thinking, well, the democratization of the technology feels like it should be of use and help to an independent filmmaker. Like, I can make a feature film on my iPhone that has the better quality than Martin Scorsese had in the 70s. I could put it up on a platform tomorrow. Like, there's no problem with me getting a movie made, edited for free on my laptop, and putting it out there into the world tomorrow for the cost of a cup of coffee and whoever and the lunch of the crew that I need to bring in, if they were willing to work for free. So why isn't it easier?
Okay, so there's a few things, right? Like there's a little bit like all of that could be a tree falling in the woods. If you're not actually like actively cultivating the people to watch it, the platforms are not designed to help you get something watched, right? Like everybody is looking for that like lightning in a bottle thing, that platform that's going to come and save us. That is pick me culture. Talking
Right.
real loud is like, oh, I'm going to go, we're going to, I don't know, a couple years ago, everybody was like, it's going to be the blockchain. And I'm like, it's not going to be the fucking blockchain. It's going to be the whatever. It's going to be this platform. It's going to be that platform. Like nobody is coming to save us. That's just not what this tech is designed to do. And the truth is, like, the same is true of our democracy. We have plenty of tools for democracy, but if we don't use them, to their best and highest use, it doesn't matter. I can build all the tools in the universe, I can teach all the workshops, but if nobody actually uses them and goes and builds these relationships and is transparent and is helping in their community and is providing that, like it doesn't matter. The right to vote is not democracy. Voting is democracy. It's why I stay on the road, and it's why I keep going out and talking to filmmakers, because I think we all need that pep talk. Mark Duplass has been an incredible supporter of Seed and Spark for many years. We've done a lot of things together. And last year at Series Fest, we ran into each other at a party, and he and the head of his production company, Mel Eslin, sat down and we're like, what are we missing? Like, what are we not thinking about? And I was like, well, I don't think there's anything that you're not thinking about. It's that nobody of your stature is taking risks on these like really new models and then reporting back on the learnings. And so bless him, like we launched the Independence Partnership between Seed and Spark and Kinema to allow the momentum of crowdfunding to roll directly into social distribution. And Mark was like, bet, I have a TV show that I can like take a risk on that with, and we will share our learnings. And already we have festivals reaching out to say, can you come and report on learnings? And we're like, we're not even done with the crowdfunding campaign yet. There's
Yeah.
7 more days. But I think that there are increasingly now, we'll call them like celebrity creators, who are feeling the pain that all of us have been feeling for a long time. And it is really helpful that some of them are really willing to step up and take the risk on these models and share back what they're learning, knowing that not all the dynamics are the same if you have a million Instagram followers versus if you have, a small mailing list. But I think interestingly, one of the things that they're learning is like they haven't done a lot of audience cultivation. Like he has a really powerful social media, but like they haven't, been cultivating a mailing list and stuff like that. And they're starting to really see the value of that, which is really exciting. And it's something that I think like stand-up comedians and musicians have done a better job at over the years, because ticket sales have been so crucial to them. And filmmakers have not been thinking in the same way, but I think we can, because ticket sales are still a place where people will spend 14, 17, $20. But we haven't been thinking that way because we've all been so consumed with streaming.
Well, this is so interesting, and I'm glad you brought up The Long Long Night, because I'm a TV writer, and I'm currently taking out a couple shows, but in the Hollywood studio system, and it sucks right now. It's just everything's so slow. This contraction, that's going on. It's just really ground everything to a halt. And so then I came across what you and Mark Duplass and the team are up to, and it's so inspiring to see. So I'm wondering, can you tell us more about The Long Long Night, how this all came together, and what exactly you're doing? Because it is a brand new model for getting a television series that's independently financed out into the world. It's so
Yeah.
cool.
I mean, thank you so much. It's also really daunting because we all have to like cultivate a different audience behavior. And that's hard. Okay.
Mhm.
Like I'm just gonna say that. Like that's hard. Hollywood did a really good job of training everybody to just be good little subscribers. And it seems like everything is free. Although if you look at your bank statements now, you're
It's not
paying
free.
twice what you paid for cable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the prices keep going up. My friend Jermaine, who works at 3 Arts here in Atlanta, he is like, I love asking people, like, what do you pay for Netflix? And nobody's right. Everybody's like, I think I pay $14.99. They look at their statement, they're like, $20, right? Like nobody knows what they're
Yeah.
paying. The Long Long Night is a TV show that Mark made with one of his best friends from high school, and it's hilarious and small, so it's limited, right? I think it's 6 episodes, maybe 8. I should know that. And they premiered it at Tribeca last year. It's like hilarious and dark and silly, and they didn't get any buyers. And Mark has made some independent TV shows like Penelope, which they were able to sell on a short-term licensing deal to Netflix. And then they went out and worked really hard to make it a success independently, right? Like they went and marketed directly to the audience, and I think that really taught him, like, oh, again, like this is Mark's own speech, like the cavalry's not coming. If we want to really get something uplifted on Netflix, like we're going to have to put in the work also. And so with the Long Long Night, because it was a low budget, I think he was really willing to like try something new and really go to the mat on this idea that we can build new relationships with our audiences. And so the partnership between Seed and Spark and Kinema is one where we just sort of outlined a way of using Seed and Spark, which I tested on my own feature documentary called Ratified, of putting Kinema screenings as an incentive on your crowdfunding campaign. Kinema has made it really easy to convert those incentives into like promo codes and things that you would then distribute to your audience. So number one, it's really easy to fulfill your incentives. How delightful. Number two, the fulfilling of incentives is watching the movie. So creators who are like at the stage of ready to release something and want to get it out there, this is great. But then Kinema makes it possible for people to host screenings, and they have thousands and thousands of screening hosts already on their platform, and they know their preferences. And so they can
Right.
say, this is good for people who really care about mental health. And they can send it out to all those screening hosts. And then those screening hosts can make money hosting screenings if they want to sell tickets, or they can license it and screen it in their communities. These are primarily non-theatrical venues. So it's like a whole new way of reaching audiences that's much more community minded. So the Long Long Night is crowdfunding on Seed and Spark right now. I guess probably not by the time this podcast comes out. I think there's 7 more days as of April 1st. Oh, but that's not April Fool's. It is for real. Um, and then they will immediately go into release on Kinema, where the backers on Seed and Spark have basically, I think, almost an entire month where they're the only ones who are going to get to see this show or host screenings, right? So they get this really like privileged status as an audience member for the 1,000 true fans. And it is like now over 1,000 people, I think, on that campaign who get this sort of privileged status. But then Kinema allows that to grow, right? So people can buy tickets, they can host screenings, they can do all sorts of things. And after the sort of premiere window, right, we're bringing back a certain kind of windowing, but we're creating windowing for television, which is not something that's typically existed
Right.
in quite this way. After this sort of like premium window, anybody who wants to see it can see it. And I think that is one of the ways that we're really thinking about helping kind of train this behavior back into the system of caring about giving people a premium experience, caring about giving them a community experience, caring a lot about community hosts. These should be like our most treasured people
Yeah.
in the entertainment business, are the ones who are rallying their communities in non-theatrical spaces. We were doing a bunch of fundraising works in progress screenings for my film Ratified to get it across the finish line. And people were hosting in churches and libraries, in, rec spaces, in backyards. And I'm like, these are the most precious people to us. And they've helped us raise quite a bit of money to be able to finish the film and then get it out there in full capacity, which is really exciting.
And sort of traditional movie Hollywood parlance, this is effectively just pre-sales. You're creating your own pre-sales system. Like everybody says, oh, we need to get minimum guarantees and pre-sales and all this other stuff to put into our finance plan. But that's what this is, only at a granular level, only like person to person, as opposed to a distributor who says, here's, this, I'll do this all for you.
I mean, that's really how we have been thinking about Seed and Spark from day one, is that when you're crowdfunding, effectively, you are signing up audience members early. But Kinema really makes it possible to give kind of an extra gift to those audience members, which is to turn around and like use that sort of early sale and turn it into potentially a community screening, an invited screening, a 10-person screening in your living room, a 50-person screening in your church. It takes the real social aspect of crowdfunding and builds it into distribution. And I think social distribution is really what we need to be thinking of now. And that is relationship building. That is about community care. That is not about shareholder value. That is about like, how do I make sure the people who care the most feel the most cared about as well? Most artists that I know, once they get sort of like settle into this, are like, oh, this is a much more delicious way to be an artist than like slogging for the attention of like some middle manager at a studio. No shade. There's lots of really wonderful people working in development who God knows are trying. But the more compressed it gets, the less people can really prioritize the things that I think artists really prioritize, which is like changing people's minds and challenging their worldview and delighting them and making them feel special or seen. And yeah, again, increasingly in the US, as honestly kakistocracy that we have here is making it harder and harder for anything produced in a corporate context to really do the things that a lot of artists do. I mean, you're starting to hear stories of like, trans storylines getting pulled out of major television shows. Increasingly in the US, there is so much pressure to comply that if artists really want to tell stories that are deeply representative, they're going to have to find alternative pathways.
There's a lot of terrible pain involved in the necessity that's been created. There's a lot of people are going to get hurt.
There's a lot of real danger and pain and death and destruction. Art is very threatening to fascism because art asks us to feel empathy. And when you have people in power right now who are actively saying that empathy is a bad thing, they're going to feel that anything that creates empathy is a threat. And so they're going to try to shut off the channels. And artists are the main channel. And so this is where like I really want everybody who's making things and telling stories to understand the importance of their jobs right now and take them that seriously.
You talked about trying to retrain the audience. Are we at a point now where the audience is starting to feel, even if it's just in their pocketbooks, a bit of the pain of what the tech movie industry has done over the last 10 years? Is that something to look forward to, or something to take some hope from? Because the audience got used to being lazy, now the audience might actually have to start to realize that they need to put some skin in the game to make this work. Is that something you're seeing, or is that something that you still feel we have to work at?
I think we're going to have to work at this for a long time. I don't think audiences are lazy necessarily. I think they're desperately overwhelmed and overtaxed. I think one of the big problems is like you see a lot of people decrying the lack of diversity of content or whatever, and it's not that that's not true. It's just that most audiences are like, no, I'm overwhelmed with content. Like there is too much out there, and so they end up just like scrolling on TikTok because that's the most frictionless way to consume. We all know that feeling of like opening up Netflix and then being like, oh no, like what am I? And then scrolling for a while and just being like, forget it. So like I think part of the challenge is we're trying to fight for an already very crowded space. And the big players can keep it crowded and keep it overwhelmed. And that keeps everybody from buying the new thing or going to the new platform. It's why I tell everybody, like, for the love of God, stop launching new streaming platforms. Please stop. That's not what, like, because audiences are like, I can't possibly need another password, right? It's just too much. And you already see the big players are starting to bundle because actually they launched too many streaming platforms. I really think it is about cultivating audiences, and that takes time and energy and affection for them. and a willingness to really like be in community with them. So you might find audiences in interesting places. It might be a subreddit, it might be a community space, it might be a film festival. There are lots of places. I found an incredible audience in activist spaces. I made a film about the Equal Rights Amendment, and I have never worked with more active and effective on the ground distributors than people in the feminist activism space. It has been amazing. So I would just say that, like, if you really think about who your film is for and what it might do for people, or who your TV show is for, or who your short is for, there are lots of ways to be in community with them in ways that will get the work seen, which I think ultimately is what people really want.
Yeah, this is so interesting, and just going back to the Netflix of it all, and really keeping an eye on what you're talking about, like moving forward about building community. I have a director friend who made some incredible comedies, 10, 15 years ago that we've all seen and generally most people like. And then he made a movie for Netflix in 2022, and he's like, if you make a movie for Netflix, does it even count? Because it just shows up and goes away, and it's as if
Yeah.
it just never even happened. And yeah, I just feel overwhelmed just like everybody else with all of these streaming platforms. And so even moving forward with, Anthony's developing a feature right now, I'm developing a feature, and we're thinking about what is the best case scenario. Is ending up on Netflix? Well, no, we want to make this movie and just go to start with a couple screens, just local theaters, and like bring people in and just create that communal experience. But what you're talking about with kinema and just different ways to show the movie around the world, and not only in movie theaters, but
Yeah.
in other social circles, that is so interesting to me. And it just goes back to this idea of like, we don't hunt anymore, right? For what we want. We don't hunt for the content. It used to be like, no, I have to get to the store and buy that DVD before it sells out. Because if it doesn't, then I have to order it by
Yeah.
mail, and it's going to take forever. Going to the record shop to look for albums. We don't really do that. It's such a great feeling, right? And then you find that hidden gem that somebody else overlooked, and we just don't do that. We just sit on the couch and scroll, and it's just not satisfying. And so I love this idea of trying to retrain the audience's brain to just say, no, do you know what? Let's go out tonight. Let's go see that thing.
I love what you're saying, because actually, I think that's I might steal this from you, that like we have to be interested in our audience's satisfaction.
Right.
Mhm.
And like,
Yeah.
what is going to be really satisfying when you go out to the theater and you see a movie that was worth it, was worth the cost of the babysitter
Yeah.
and worth the cost of showing up. And like, I saw something that was produced for, I think it was produced independently, and then Reverie bought it. And they did a screening of it here in Atlanta before it was set to stream on Reverie. And I Am Tony Talks is a content creator, like social influencer, makes comedy content, made y'all the wackiest workplace musical full of characters that you're like, who even are these people? Like, just out of left field, nothing. And I wasn't following I Am Tony Talks. I got invited to this from my friends at Reverie, and I showed up, and the joy in that space was so palpable that I was like, I will live off of this creative energy for the next 6 months.
Right.
Like, think about it and I get chills. Also,
Yeah.
Angelica Ross hosted the Talkback, and if you can ever, was one of the greatest talkbacks I've ever seen. I've never seen a hype woman like this. But I would just say that, like, there were some sound things, and there were some focus issues, whatever. There was like some little thing. It didn't matter at all. It
Right.
was so palpably joyful and satisfying to watch this and be in the space and feel how much the creators loved making this thing. And as an audience member, I was just like, well, fan for life, following I Am Tony Talks, gonna tell everybody about it, gonna drive everybody to it, gonna give all the props to Reverie for being smart enough to pick it up and create this community experience. Gonna remember that I love Out on Film, who are the hosts of this here. Like, they reconnected me to my own community
Yeah.
through this like one delightful experience. And I had to like leave my family for the night. And you know what I mean? Like,
But
all
you'll
these,
go back. Like, you would go back again if there was another, like, similar or
Yes.
if
Anyone
you
associated with this project for forever, if they're like, come to this thing, I'm going.
Fan for life, and that night was worth it for you to leave your family for
100%.
a few hours and check this out. Exactly.
It was so satisfying. I just love this idea, this language that you're using about like feeling really satisfied and getting really invested in your audience's satisfaction. I think that's awesome.
again, the music industry, or at least independent music, to a certain extent, has found a way to do this. Like, if you go down Broadway Street in Nashville and you go into a bar in on Broadway Street and you go into that bar, you'll probably hear music that you think should be on a top 10 Billboard album somewhere, but it's by a band that you've never heard of before. And you walk in there and you develop a connect, and of course, because you're one on one with the band, you develop this connection with the band, even if it's music you don't normally even listen to. You get caught up in the crowd and in the environment and everything else. You go online and find them on Spotify and so on, or whatever it is, or you used to buy their CD right there or whatever. But at the very least, you've done two things. One, you'll go see that band anywhere they play, but also the venue that it was playing at, because the venue also creates this connection with you, because now that's a venue that you think to yourself, well, that venue puts on great moments like this,
Yes.
and I want to go back to that.
Yes. So I think that especially, well, I guess all art requires an audience of some, but like visual artists, especially like cinema artists, musicians, really need to think like our work doesn't just connect people by magic. Our work connects people if we really think about the ways in which it can connect people. The venue is really important. The partners are really important. That talkback host is really important. Like who we're distributing with is really important. All of that should be part of the calculus of like, what do I want this thing to do in the world?
Right.
I want it to enrich my local festival. I want it to enrich my local venue. I want it to, like, this is why I have such a problem with the concept of an agent, having an agent, like giving away your agency to somebody to do it for you. It's like, no, we have to deeply possess the agency that comes with making work. The agency, our power to connect people, not just with what goes on the screen, but with how it gets there and how it gets to people. I love this. I'm taking away a lot of things from your reflections on this that I'm going to be perpetuating forward. So thank you so much.
I think Ken and I can both say this. When both of us were started talking about who we wanted to have guests on this, we were thinking, well, what's the one place that we have gone to that has sort of changed our view of what filmmaking and film, the ecosystem, should be? And it's a place like Seed and Spark, where the immediate entrance to the door is, make movies that matter, the representing all the value systems that we are trying to put into our own films, but distilling it down into a very bite-sized, easily digestible piece where it's like, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. The wedding registry wish list for how to, what is needed to make a film, it makes sense because it's easily explainable. And I think that that's the gift that maybe you're bringing, but also that I think that as filmmakers, we have to create these moments and experiences for audiences and for our community. And the weird thing is that then it becomes like Ken's making a horror film, I'm making a spy film, and there's no audience demographic crossover other than we could create the experience that they want to come back to. And so they might come see both films, not because necessarily that they're one or the other, but they want to come back because the venue, all these things are built into place, and that's the commonality between the film.
Hollywood treats audiences sort of monolithically, right? Like women movies and men like men movies, and to some extent they have trained audiences that way. Although women have to watch man movies, otherwise there's not a lot to watch. Independent creators can be in relationship with their audiences and take them on a journey. I'll go back to the Duplass brothers. Like, it's The League, it's Togetherness, and it's Creep Tapes. My mom, huge fan of their work. She's not watching Creep Tapes.
Yeah,
Right?
Right.
But she's there for all of it and is like entertained to be kind of like in the mix. And I think it's really possible to cultivate audiences across many genres and many interests. And then also they might like dip their toe in something that they don't expect. My in-laws are a really good example of like they watch everything in the theater. They really go to see everything. We go and we're like, what have you seen? And they've seen everything. And they love spy films. Yes. But I really think it's possible to get people out to things that they might not otherwise show up for when you actually work in relationship with one another. And that's really exciting. And that's exciting for them too, to trust in an artist enough to go see something that might be outside of their wheelhouse.
the elephant in the room is the social media side of all of this. I loathe the amount of time I feel like I now have to spend there just to because that feels like the only place I can talk about my film and build an audience as I'm trying to develop it because there's no other place to do it. So, I mean, what's the antidote to that? What's the solution in that regard? Because it feels like the evil empire that we have to all play in.
I don't want to be cavalier about this because I think that's an existential question for modern humanity right now, is the positives and negatives of the constant connectivity of social media and the way that it makes it feel like you have to be there. That means they won, they did a great job, right? In a well-regulated society, maybe it would be a public utility, right? Maybe we would agree that it's a public utility. It certainly is used like one. There are lots of ways to build audiences that have nothing to do with social media. It's building partnerships with organizations that already have connectivity. It is showing up in spaces. It is gathering people yourself, like offering something valuable and gathering people. And no, that doesn't start at 10,000 people, but like you can work up there, finding still specialized corners of the internet where you feel like it aligns with your values. There are plenty of open source tools out there that you can use to build websites, gather people that aren't necessarily contributing entirely to the evil empire. You can build up text message threads. Like there are lots and lots of ways to connect with people that isn't social media. I really advocate for mailing lists or whatever, text, the ability to reach people directly in their inbox or on their phone, but in a way that is not intermediated by one of these big algorithmified platforms, because then you just have no control over who sees what and when, or how you can monetize, right? Like Google has done this with YouTube so many times where they're like, here are the terms for monetizing your audience. And you're like, great. And so you do everything to the T and you start monetizing your audience. And they're like, just kidding. Now it's
Yeah,
this. Right? So they can
right.
change the rules all the time. It can be fast, cheap, and beautiful, but it can only be two at a time. Right? So, like, if you really want to make the investment to stay, aligned with your values or how you want to spend your time, like, it might take more time or it might look really different than you have imagined it up until now. I would say the vast majority of what's worked for me on my last film is partnerships with organizations that care about what I care about. And that was much more effective than any of the other tools that we were using. And we were reaching people in their inboxes through organizations they already cared about. In the horror space, there are so many brands that have done a great job at this, from festivals like Fantastic Fest to platforms like Shudder, where like they give a shit about these audiences and they cultivate them and they care about them and they care for them, and it shows, right?
Right.
There are lots of other opportunities to cultivate that, but it takes time.
What advice do you have right now for somebody starting out today? If they're they have their team, they're about to take on a feature. What are the things that they should keep in mind, think about from beginning to end? Whether it's crowdfunding or distribution or marketing or any of that. If I was making a film in 2025, what's the big thing to keep in mind?
Be crystal clear about what you want to do with this film and make sure that accomplishing that goal is not going to be in someone else's hands who has to say yes in order for you to make that happen. So if your goal is, I need as many people as possible to see this film, then you better have a plan for
Right.
how as many people as possible are going to see the film. And going to Sundance and getting picked up by Sony Pictures Classics or whatever, that's not a plan. And so what I would say is really evaluate your strategy for your project and look at where you are just waiting to be picked as part of your strategy, and replace that with something that you actually have control over. And then you
Yeah.
have to be willing to have the patience and perseverance to accomplish those goals yourself. Now, would it be love? Like, I'm not saying don't submit to Sundance. I'm not saying like don't take the moonshots, but that's not a strategy. I hope that you are not buying lottery tickets to put food on the table every day. So, presumably, you are designing the strategy for sustainable living over things you can definitely control. And you need to do the same to your creative career. So, I think the biggest sort of challenge that we're facing is this continued pick me as a strategy. Pick me is not a strategy. Pick me is a
Right.
lottery ticket. And everybody's got a little bit of pick me in their long-term strategy because it makes us feel like if I just do this, it will prove that I am special enough to be
Right.
picked. And so what I would say is like, what if you're not special and you still deserve to have a career as an artist? What if your career as an artist is not up to anybody else? It's a decision that you make. And then you evaluate everything from there. I deserve to build a sustainable career as an artist, and I am going to do what I need to do in order to do that. As opposed to, I'm just going to try to make the best thing possible and somebody will see how great I am. Keep your power, keep your agency at every single turn, at every single step. It is excruciating. It is challenging. It is just as excruciating and challenging as getting told no all the time, right?
Yeah.
But at the very least, there's a next step you can always take when you are in possession of the control over your career.
Well, and
You
that's
ra-
really the reason why we came together and created this podcast is all about becoming your own gatekeeper, right? And like I mentioned, I've worked on Netflix shows as a writer and co-producer and other writers' rooms, and the grind of the studio system is, as you said, it's the pick me culture, and the amount of work that you put into creating, whether it's a pitch for a feature film at MGM or writing a feature and or a TV series, and just hoping that in this cycle that there's a development executive, there's really like 100 people that have to say yes and pick you for your career to move forward. It's
The
exhausting.
second they can replace you with AI, they will.
they will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm sort of straddling both worlds right now and really just trying to dive way deeper into the indie side of things and yeah, become my own gatekeeper. In Canada, we have Telefilm, which is a government organization. I'm sure you know all about it. And so Anthony and I have both applied for the regional fund that is in the process right now. But a lot of people here in Western Canada have applied for it. And so we just had meetings with Telefilm the other day, which was a 15-minute pitch. And even though the grant system here in Canada still has a bit of a pick me culture, right? Because it's now so competitive, they asked, as part of my pitch, I was like, and we have $100,000 set aside in our movie's $800,000, and $100,000 of that right now in the budget that we submitted is for marketing. And she's just like, well, you said that you have $100,000 in the budget right now, but why aren't you just applying for the marketing stream later? And I'm like, no. Like, as filmmakers, we need to think about marketing and distribution as we are in development and before pre-production for this. And I'm like, that's why we need the money now. We don't need the money later. And what you're asking is that we actually apply for another grant, hopefully get picked in order to market the movie. That doesn't work. And so even within the indie space here in Canada, some of these systems have to change. And I think that mindset about knowing what the goal is, how are you going to get this movie out there is just so imperative that filmmakers think this way.
It's such a great illustration what you're talking about of how the systems have not caught up to the actual realities of how things
Mhm.
are getting made today, kind of across the board, right? But also our like socialization has not caught up
Yeah.
because it's changed so fast, right? Like government institutions, like they don't steer the ship a different direction very quickly, right? And I know there's a lot of really smart people in Canada that are actually really trying to influence this because they've seen this writing on the wall for a really long time. But it takes a long time. And it also takes creators like you showing up there being like, no, that doesn't work anymore. And they'll have to hear that, a couple 100,000 times, and then they might actually change the way they do it. But yeah, I mean, again, like we have to be the leaders. The institutions are the trailing edge. They are never the leading edge. It's always the artists who are the leading edge. And I think that's the other thing, maybe in terms of advice, it's like have confidence that you can be the leading edge. Yes, it can feel like, especially right now, that we're just sort of like bumping along doing our best, but you can be the leading edge of innovation in your space.
Well, it seems like we're all looking for a savior. The Duplass, the Independence Project, and your partnership is like, oh, they're going to create the path, and then we'll all just follow the path. But that's actually not what we're talking about here. It's it at all, right?
That's like somebody else will vote for the right person.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody who is using these tools is forging the path. And should that ostensibly make it easier for the next person? Yes. if you are willing to be utterly transparent about how it went, what was hard about it, what did we learn, what do we need to do better, like we're already making improvements to the platform right now on the basis of the things that we're learning. And Mark is in a position to experiment with us in that way, and I'm really grateful to him, because then we can make it easier for the next folks. But it's hard work to use these tools, right? I
Right.
want people to understand that, like, even if you are following this path, it is so much work. And anybody who's crowdfunded before already knows that, right? Like, crowdfunding is a pretty well-worn groove. And even if you're really good at it, it's hard. And that's because there aren't any easy solutions right now. That's why we love to fantasize about pick me culture. I absolutely fantasize about winning the lottery. I would be such a good, wealthy person. Like, that's probably not in the cards for me. And
Yeah.
that is entirely a fantasy. And every day I
Yeah.
have to wake up and try to realize that same dream of like long-term career sustainability with the things that I can control.
I always say that I think I'd be a much better billionaire than any of the other billionaires out
Oh
there.
my God.
Just give me
I mean,
that's all I need.
that's a low bar to set, though.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, my character level is
Yeah.
my character bar is not that high, but I feel as though and that's that whole thing is like, if you just gave me $10 million to make a movie, I can make a way better movie than anything else you'd see out there, because I've learned to make movies for 50,000 to 250,000 already. Like I mean, we made $250,000 feature, and it's a movie. I mean, so you give me, I don't even know what I would do with 60 days of a set and $10 million to solve a problem. I mean, I feel like I'd be
That is
sitting
winning the
there.
lottery. Yeah.
Yeah, but I always think to myself, like why how can these films go so crazy, and they can't make a good movie for 10 million. I always feel like I could take that and do so many wonders with it, but maybe that's the point, is that this isn't about the money. It's about the you having to put the work in to start from the script stage, if you will, and say like, okay, so if I didn't have to ask anybody for money for this script, could I make it?
Yeah. I mean, this movie is getting dragged a lot. Electric State, right, which had a $300 million production budget and was pretty garbage. Honestly, hot take. If it had been written by a woman, it would have solved like 80% of the problems in that movie. But I digress. I think you have this really interesting idea that somehow the more money, the better the quality. And I think the truth is there is a real complicated calculus that we all have to make. And that's why I really encourage everybody to really understand the business, which is like, how many people have to see it in what way in order for that budget to make sense? To make sense for an acquirer, to make sense for you. And because they have driven the business model off the cliff, they have made these sort of like impossible economies of scale of like, if you're going to make something for $320 million, then you have to assume that there's going to be like 100 million new subscribers to your platform because of it. And if
Yeah,
not, then that's a total bust. Well, what does that mean? Like, the average filmmaker can't even start to think in the scale of like 100 million new anything, right?
yeah.
So, like, what can you do with 1,000 true fans or 10,000 true fans? And how can you work up to that place so that you have a really reliable way of doing things? I think Jim Cummings is one of those people that I think we're not talking about enough.
Yeah.
um,
Right.
where he really, there's also, there's a few teams out there that have quietly figured out how to make movies and make money making movies for 100,000, 400,000, $1 million. They've done it slowly and they've done it quietly and they've done it in partnership with their audiences, and they have offered a ton of value back to the filmmaking community and to the audience community. Those are the people that I feel like we should be uplifting to really like kind of lead the way into this future. And they are, I mean, Jim is constantly sharing what he's learned. And so I just think that there's kind of a new mentality that we've got to adopt in this time. And it's really, really hard. It's much harder to get people to think differently than to act differently.
Jim's a good example of the hard part with what Jim does, though, is that Jim threatens the industrial film complex, if you will, in terms of what because he advocates for, he's like, build your sound editing studio in your garage with gear that you can return 30 days later, so you don't need the post house. so to speak, to finish your film. And he sits there and he does Foley by himself with a microphone.
Because I live in Atlanta and there's a lot of independent post houses here, and like I don't think they're the bad guys.
No, they're
but
not.
I feel like that is a really good example of like what you have to be willing to do.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right? Like what you have to be willing to do, how you have to be willing to change the way you think about things, skills you might have to be willing to learn, and the friends you might need to make. So like I'm probably not going to be the Foley guy, but like I have friends who would totally do that, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
and building a community with great taste and of incredibly generous spirit. I think those are the things. Like what you can do on your own is you can be a person with great taste who really strives to make excellent things and is incredibly generous of spirit. And then you go demonstrate to your community how much better it is to be that way than any other way, right? Because pick me culture makes us competitive and shitty. And it gives us
Right.
a sense that there's only so much pie. And that's not what this is. This is more like love. There's plenty of it to go around. And so that's where I would just say you can control how you behave and how you show up in the community. And that will influence other people, right? But that's not the point. The point is really that you control how you show up and you can really make a difference for yourself.
You can be a good human, and that can be good enough, and that can do exactly, you'll live a more fulfilled life regardless of the outcome anyway.
That part,
Yeah.
that part also.
Look, Emily, thank you so much for all of this. This has just been a blast. It's been super fun. We really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. These were great questions. And I've taken a lot away from this also that I'm going to share with my community going forward.
Okay, so that's it for this week's episode of Off the Lot. We want to hear from you. If there are any topics you want covered or any questions you'd like answered, please email us at podcast.offthelot@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. Our handles are in the show notes. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And share this with your friends. See you next week.